lack of friction and the simplicity of it make it a better way to bank rather than dealing with the legacy bankers and the hassles that come there. You know, that to me is why it's so exciting and why I'm all in. We saw this with internet stocks too. In the early days of the internet, everybody jumped in, and it's really a spray and pray investment approach, right? Because you're trying to find out who the real players are. And you saw that with early days. You know, now people will mint anything, and if you have a following, people will buy it, right?
Yeah.
People will put out tokens, and if you can sell enough of them, you know, if you can hype them enough, then people will buy them. And just like you're seeing the tokens go way up, and then, you know, they all kind of trade in parallel. You know, the biggest difference between the early days of the internet and when the internet bubble burst and what's happening with tokens is one, interest rates, and two, it's a lot easier to hype a token than it is to hype a stock.
Oh, yeah.
You know, there's no SEC rules per se that prevent you from doing some of these things. And so you're right, TZ, there's going to be cycles, and there's going to be big drops in a lot of these things. And at the end of the day, in my opinion anyways, you know, the underlying technology will make a difference. And, you know, the principles in play of, you know, are they a good company doing smart things will make or break the company.
Awesome. Do you have favorite components of the DeFi ecosystem?
I don't want to really hype things at all because, you know, it's interesting because, again, going back to the early days of the internet, when I went on CNBC, I could watch the ticker. If I'm talking about stocks, I could watch the ticker and those stocks would be going up. And it's the same thing with tokens now with social media, right? You know, people, I must have 20 wallets, right? And people, one of, you know, where I minted some things, that's obviously going to be public. And so people look what I put in that wallet, and that's kind of my hype box, if you will.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I tried, you know, the things that I've already talked about publicly are Injective, MFT, Matic, what's the other one? And then I'm in Ethereum and Bitcoin, and then I bought some Phantom. But those are in those wallets, so people are going to be able to see that public anyways. And then there's some other ones where I've invested that I'm not ready to talk about yet that are in different wallets.
Obviously, a lot of comparisons that get made between kind of the early internet and kind of the current crypto ecosystem. Are there other, you know, are there other like comparisons you see and you know, either really, you know, really stark similarities or really stark differences? Like maybe what's different about it too?
There's not a lot different about it. I mean, the biggest difference is the SEC, right? Because most of the internet and the ensuing internet bubble was done through public companies. And effectively, there's tokens are not equities at all, and I'm not suggesting that, but they're tradable, right? They're tradable assets that go up and down in value, and when something can go up and down in value and people want them to go higher, they're going to hype them, and they're going to play games to get those prices up there. And, you know, the way DeFi is working, there's a lot of amazing things to DeFi. I love DeFi because, you know, every Bitcoin, every Ethereum that you own, to use those two as an example, not to exclude BNB, but, you know, but those two in particular, you're a bank, right? And you can lend, you can borrow, and it's decentralized if you do it right, so that you have a lot of power and the friction is reduced considerably versus traditional banking. And, you know, when it comes to exchanging value with somebody else, it's easier than Venmo. It's easier, you know, because there's nobody, it's not centralized, right? And so I think the impact there is incredibly dramatic, and you'll start to see societal influence as a result as this grows. And so while, you know, there's a lot of hype, and a lot of this yield farming, I think, can be challenging and scary, right? Because when, you know, the underlying factor, when people are chasing liquidity, and you guys have to deal with this, so tell me if I'm wrong, CZ. I'm still learning this, right? When you chase liquidity and trying to find balance, right? Because you're trying to get all the pairs lined up. If you don't have enough DAI, you've got to go pay to get DAI. If you don't have enough Tether, you got to pay, or other tokens, right? If you don't have enough BNB, I got to pay more for BNB. But the yield returns are in the tokens themselves, right? And so, even though you set a limit, it's almost like the stocks that keep on giving out options and warrants, right? Where even though your treasury has a limited amount, you're paying people to do this. And, people underlying just resell those tokens, and then they just go out into the wild, if you will, and just increase the total number of tokens being exchanged. And that's not really creating fundamental value, right? That's just trying to get money to move around. And, you guys have dealt with that with what's it called, pancake swap and syrup, and you saw that shit, right? Just pancake and syrup. It cracks me up. But, so there's a lot of shifting money around and a lot of chasing money. And it's a game of musical chairs at some level, right? And so when somebody can't pay the toll, or somebody can't, when you get tokens who aren't exchanged, then it's going to be a problem. So what I think is going to happen, I'd be curious what your thoughts are. I think new tokens are going to have to bank. They're going to have to put up, stable coins to say, and maybe it's happening already. Binance, I need for you to change to do swaps on this. And so I'll put up 1 million stable coins, tethered to the USD, and you'll trade this for me. And as long as everything works, I'll make up your deficit. Are you guys starting to see that at all, or do you just do it based off of volume and interest?
What is your take on blockchain gaming and the incorporation of NFTs into gaming? I think that's actually certainly a hot category we maybe haven't touched on just yet. Yeah,
video games have used tokens for years, just, calling them different things, and cashless currency for years. It might be Fortnite Gold, it might be whatever. And so it's a given that it'll be used. It's just a question whether or not the biggest publishers want to, go to blockchain, and they'll make that decision based off of whether or not it's more effective for the company or not. If they can continue just using gold, which has a big burn rate, so if Fortnite keeps on just using, their own currency, the burn rate is huge, right? Because it's not really tradable after the fact, which means they make, it's like a gift card, right? What's not spent, they keep. Even though on their balance sheet, they may have to deal with it differently, it's still cash in their hand. And so it really comes down to the business case more than anything else.
Yeah. And I think on this point, it's similar with airline miles, air miles. So there's so much unspent air miles where if they bring it also to the blockchain, they may be a huge cost in that sense to the guys issuing it. Mm-hmm. So, but the first ones who issue it do have that significant advantage, saying, "Look, we're the ones." Then they move that advantage to the users, which is now it's more transparent and everything. So I think it's going to happen sooner or later. Don't know who's going to do it first, but it's going to come. Yeah.
Yep. Awesome. And I guess as a final question from the community here to close things off, SDub 2019 asks, Mark, why are you so passionate about things? What drives your passion?
One, I'm competitive as shit, right? I just love to compete, and when I started out, I was always the youngest. Now I'm not the youngest anymore. And so I'm really competitive, and I like to learn new technology. And when something gets me really excited, I've been through a lot of disruption phases, right? Or disruption cycles. And I've seen where they've worked and where they haven't worked, and what's worked and what hasn't worked. And it took a while from my perspective for the smart contracts and the layer ones or layer zeros to really start to take hold. But now that I see them, and now that we're seeing applications that really enable them, it's exciting. And I think, to CZ's talked a lot about, and I agree that we're in a proof of concept mode right now. Yeah. And part of the challenge is, it's not mainstream yet. And you guys asked about that as well, right? It's not mainstream. There's a tight community, and it's almost misleading because it's a global community. And here in the United States, we really tend to be, we not understand that what's global. We think it's all United States driven, right? When it's not, right? That's just how people here think. And so a lot of it, particularly here in the States, there's a long way to go. It's just tiny. It is tiny. And when you look at whether it's NFTs, whether it's token purchases, we also look at social media. We get on Twitter, right? Or we go, and you see all these people talking about it, and it's really misleading because it makes it seem like it's really big when it's really tiny. And then you go on the Discord server, or and you see 350 people talking about it, right? It's relatively tiny. And so there's a long way to go. And so that's why I'm excited, because we barely scratched the surface. That's why I keep on, making this the equivalent of late 94, early 95 with the internet, because it's that same level of excitement. The people in the community got it, right? And we were all searching for new applications. In my case, it was audio and video, and everybody told me I was crazy. I can't tell you how many times I heard, this internet thing, I mean, dude, I'll just turn on the radio. I'll just turn on my TV. I just got satellite TV. It's brand new, right? I can get it from anywhere. You're crazy. You're wasting your time. And so when you're at that point, you're in there at the right point. The hard part is there's a lot of narrative and a lot of people trying to make money off the tokens, and I don't think enough people trying to understand the underlying applications and where they can be used. And as more and more businesses come in, and the proof will be in what I said earlier, if companies in particular can find ways to change their business and compete better, it's over. Yeah. If individuals feel comfortable with DeFi and we get out of the liquidity chases, right, and the yield farming chase. Yield farming is narrative creation right now, right? It's liquidity chasing. And liquidity, to your point, CG, I can't agree more that is not sustainable. And that's going to be a problem. And so we've got to transition from that as quickly as possible to show people that DeFi is really personal banking. Yeah. That's what it is. And we've got to have better applications and make it easier to get fiat into the DeFi platforms, even with KYC. And make it so simple that my 11-year-old or 14-year-old or 17-year-old don't ask me about, we don't have a conversation about opening up a bank account for a savings account, because, put aside what the interest rates are, the negligible interest rates, but more because the lack of friction and the simplicity of it make it a better way to bank rather than dealing with the legacy bankers and the hassles that come there. That to me is why it's so exciting and why I'm all in.